listeners, good evening, dear John. We have a lovely guest this evening, John Dykes, person that worked as sports presenter for many, many years in different continents and very long time in Asia. And today he's delivering a wonderful workshop that so many of us are looking forward and cannot wait to listen to. So, dear John, my first question that I would like to ask you, you are a big name in Premier League broadcasting, and you transitioned not fully, but partially to a new career. What was the main point that made you decide to change or adapt?
Well, firstly, thanks very much, Irina, for having me. It's great to be sitting here. Great to be working with Toastmasters, and I'm looking forward to speaking in a short time. And I'll be talking about exactly what you've just asked me, because when, as you know, people transition in their careers and they pivot, it's very often not down to one thing. Usually it's a combination of circumstances. And yes, after 20 years of being a very familiar household name, as you will, for presenting Premier League football, I found myself in a situation where the role I was in came to an end. And when it came to an end, I had a big decision to make, which was, do I carry on trying to do the same thing, chasing after something that I'd done before, or did I take all that I knew and all that I could do and all that I had experienced and try and reapply that in a different way? And I took that decision. So where you find me right now is in the midst of a career transformation. I still do some broadcasting work, usually more of a commentator than a presenter, and I still do some sports hosting, but more and more now I'm moving into this public speaking and also in coaching space.
It's most of the time when people transition like this, it takes somewhat courage, but also knowing the direction. What was for you one of the challenges maybe, and how did you decide this is the direction I want to try?
That's a very good question, because you're right, it's not something that you do very easily. I initially, because human nature is such that we protect ourselves, when I realized that there wasn't going to be quite as much of that big time TV work for me, certainly not in the market that I was working in at that time, I thought, well, I have to just keep on doing the same thing I've always done, but just on a lower scale. And the problem with that is as soon as you start thinking about things in a negative sense, everything begins to spiral downwards. And when it spirals downwards, there's a chance also that you could become negative yourself. You could become a bit resentful about not having what you used to have, maybe even a bit bitter. Oh, why is that person doing it now when I used to do it? And I didn't want to be that person. So I thought, okay, how do I find a purpose? And how do I repurpose myself? And that was a much healthier way to go. So it took me a little while, but once I got to a position where I saw something that I wanted to do, I saw people speaking, I saw people coaching, I saw things that I thought, yeah, I can do that. Then I decided to fully step into it.
That's a lovely thing that you mentioned, also repurposing, because one of the workshops that I attended from Lovely John was about rebranding. Actually, the speech, people were so impressed, I was so impressed. And you mentioned that rebranding takes also, looking at your own skills and seeing how do you put that into use, what you mentioned. So, yeah, I'm very curious, is there any insight that you can offer to people who are really trying to rebrand themselves and are just starting their rebranding journey, so to speak?
Yeah, you mustn't see it as a complete 180 degree about turn. You can't, because that means that you actually are being negative and dismissive of all the things that have made you what you are already. And you shouldn't do that, because what we are, and this is one thing I'm going to talk about this evening, is you shouldn't be chasing a dream for the wrong reasons, because people project it onto you or you have a perception of something. What you should be doing is actually building your story. And if that story turns into what you might want to call your dream, fine. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't. What it has to be is it has to be an accumulation of all that you have been, all that you can be, and it has to be a positive step forward. So if that sounds a bit vague, it probably is. But if you're looking for a specific, what I would say is do a full inventory on yourself, assess the market,
Correct.
And then say, how do I fit what I've got to that? What do I need to do to fill the gap? Knowledge, connections, marketing, business, whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's a very good point. One of the things when I speak to people about this topic is when you're very well known in one area, and you, John, were so known in that area of sports, how do you enter the door where you're not known yet?
Good question. It's a tricky one, and it's funny because I know that in the audience tonight there will be 20 or 30% of probably men, some women of a certain age, who will have been watching me many, many years ago, who are here because they want me to talk about their favorite football team. And I think once we've finished the talk and once we've done all the formal stuff, yeah, I'll be happy to do that. But it is a perception issue, and what I do is, for example, tomorrow I'm going to be sitting in the office of a big global fintech company, and I'm going to be working with their customer success team, and I'm going to be training them in, yes, speech and presentation, but also in how to hook an audience, how to be relatable, how to be engaging when you tell a story. I've already worked with the same company's sales team, I've worked with their business development team, and now I'm working with those that deal with customers. So when I first went in, I was worried they would look at me and go, "What are you doing here? You're the football guy." You have that real sort of sense of imposter syndrome. But as soon as I started speaking to them, I realized that the stuff I was talking about was the same issues that they faced. How do I sell something? How do I appeal to somebody? How do I hook somebody? How do I engage someone? How do I keep someone's attention? Things that I've been doing, I'm finding are now applicable across other industries.
So here's the question, and I think so many will want to know this evening, but also our audience will be watching. How do you hook your listener to something interesting? Is there a formula? Like when you enter an audience and you know, what's your go-to strategy?
Well, it depends on context. Now, when I was working on TV, generally speaking, people had turned on the TV because they were going to watch the game. They might have been, I'm not sure if I'll watch tonight, let's see who's playing, but by and large, I wasn't really having to sell it to them too much. What I was doing was I was telling them the story. This is why we're watching tonight. This is what's exciting about it. This is why it's going to be amazing. That's cool. But now I find myself speaking to people who are literally saying, I need to hook someone because I'm trying to sell you something. So what I do is I take it back to the classics. I take it back to a problem-solution situation. I take it back to a what-if scenario. I take it back to real-world relatability. And so I take it back to the thing that I think is most important in everything we do, empathy. Show empathy for their problems, for their needs. Let them show empathy for you as a real person. Use real-world examples, everyday human experiences, and that way you tell your story. And I've always believed in that throughout my career. Just empower the listener and bring them into the conversation.
That's amazing. You're telling personal stories, yeah, it matters a lot. And this is what we actually remember from people. So lovely tip. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So my question is, and especially I think, I'm so curious your opinion, right? You speak online to millions of listeners and then you show up on stage. Is there a difference when you speak in that setting versus in a real life setting? Is there some energy shift that you are experiencing?
That's a really interesting situation. It's something I'm trying to address at the moment, and tonight's session is going to be an interesting one because I'm not just doing a talk. It's not as if it was a TED and I'm just delivering a talk.
Yeah.
I'm actually workshopping as well. So I'm very conscious that I want a lot of engagement from the audience tonight, and there are periods in the talk when I'm going to break out and go, okay, this is going to be a breakout workshop session. We're going to try and do a bit of this and we're going to learn something here. So I'm going to work along those lines. And what's interesting about the question you asked is this: yes, there is a distinct difference in what we do. And what we do is, on screen, for me, I'll look at the camera and I'll imagine that that camera is one person and I'm speaking to you. Now I know that there could be hundreds of thousands, even million people there, but I will treat it as this, it's a one-on-one conversation, as I would when I look at you. On stage, you're far more aware that there are individuals, some of whom you may know, some of whom who may be showing positive body language, others who might not be. So that's something I'm having to learn to cope with. Deal with the fact that there are actually people there. And my way of dealing with that in the past tended to be that I would slightly sort of defocus my eyes so that I wasn't actually seeing what anyone was doing, but it gave them the impression that I was looking at them. And I find that's something that works quite well. So you're engaging with people, but you're not getting sucked into a weirdness of making eye-to-eye contact with somebody.
Lovely, thank you so much. John dear, when I listen to you speak, you have a very strong presence.
Thank you.
So people who are starting their adventure, their path to public speaking, what do you have any habits before you go on stage, before you're online, before you are talking to a lot of people? Do you have any habits that ground you or prepare you?
Yes, Yes, what I do is, and I do this when I coach people, and when I'm coaching people, everything begins and ends with speaking. You know, we might be talking to salespeople or talking to customer success people, and eventually we're going to workshop stuff that is specific to what they do. But underpinning everything that they do, that we do, is speech and presentation and presence. So the thing I do is I do a little thing where I say, find your voice. And it doesn't mean reach down your throat and find the voice. It's just discover who you are in terms of the way you speak, the way you project yourself. Make sure that you deliver the best of yourself when you do that. And then once you've figured out how you're at your best, all of those exercises that we do, all of the projection we do, then do one very important thing. Switch on speaker mode. It's almost like Clark Kent jumping into the phone booth and becoming Superman, right?
Yeah.
You switch on speaker mode and you say, right, as if you were going to go and do a workout or a high rocks or whatever it might be. Warm up, switch on, and now this is the mode I'm in.
So that's a bit of like a character building, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your character on stage, and you need to switch on that character.
It's a
Something
performance.
Like
It's a performance to an extent, and but the thing about that is you can do it when you're speaking to your kids, to your spouse, to anyone. You can say, oh, I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to tell it as well as I can, and I'm going to use my best voice, and my best body language. Consciously learn how to switch on to speaker mode.
Lovely tip. Thank you so much. Very valuable, I think, for our listeners. My next question is about people that you've met, and I'm sure you've met many sports legends, and we've seen some pictures. What is one thing that you learned from them, and maybe also about their presence, or what makes them different, for example?
Yeah. I mean, the thing about the sports people is very often many of them are very protected and sheltered and media trained, so they don't give much away. They've been trained not to say anything. But when you do, and when you are lucky enough to find somebody who has a presence and an awareness that they are able to be comfortable in a situation. For example, a young Serena Williams, I interviewed her when she was a teenager, 17 maybe, with her sister Venus. And even at that age, she was open, she was engaging, she was inquiring about life. She tried to use big words in our interview and said, does that word work? I said, yeah, it's a good word. Great, I try to use a new one every time I do an interview, and I'm trying to learn all the time. I thought, wow, this girl's going to go places, because she wasn't scared, she was ambitious, she had a learning mentality, a mindset, a growth about her, and that was fantastic. So when you come across people like that and they have that presence, it's really impressive. Similarly though, the key to, if you want like a generic answer about any sports person, make them trust you, make them relate to you, and make them comfortable with you. And once you do that, you realize that they're no different from you and I. They're human beings, they have fears and failings and weaknesses and things they love and don't like so much. And once they recognize that you're there to empower them, that you're not there to harm them, to be critical or cynical in any way, then they just talk to you. And once that happens, that's what you want.
Connecting on a human level.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
John, what do you think makes an unforgettable speaker? Or, like in your mind, when I say amazing speaker, does someone certain comes to your head, and why?
Yeah, I'm not going to name names, but what I would say is, broadly speaking, there's a pun there, I think you talk about, some people talk about presence. So there are those who get out there and they're the commanding, inspirational speakers, and they have the voice and the presence. That's great. And then you have those who have a message that is unique. They did something no one else has done, or they've been through something no one else should go through, and there's that. But the thing that we all crave is relatability. And that's something that I have to do. So if I'm on stage talking about these superstars of football, I'm very conscious of people in the audience are going, yeah, cool story, but what's it got to do with my life? And that's, I think, the key to any memorable speech. If you've sat there and you've gone, yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, that's indeed. You need to connect somehow to your speaker.
Without forcing it. Without forcing it, it just has to be something that you empathize with and feel like, okay, I've come away having learned something from this.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. John, when did you feel that you had a moment where you felt your voice really made a difference? Do you have such an incident maybe that you could share?
In my previous career, I was very blessed in that I worked for a broadcaster at a time when sport was really taking off on TV. And we broadcast into certain parts of Asia, including India and the Indian subcontinent. And we were huge on ESPN and Star Sports across India. And nowadays, I could be anywhere in the world, and somebody might come up to me and they'll say, John, hi. And I'll go, hi. And they'll go, just wanted to say thank you. You taught us how to love sport, or you showed us what sports TV could be about. And you know, it means so much. And it wasn't just me, it was the channel, and it was the programming, and it was the sport that we had the rights to. But it was fabulous to hear that something I was part of made such a big difference to people. So that was great in that career. More recently, when I've been coaching, what's been amazing has been a bit like when you teach, to see the progress. And that's why when I go into a room, I can say to them, within minutes, you're going to be a better speaker. And it makes me feel so good to know that that isn't an empty promise, that it's true. That by just focusing on things like voice, emphasis, pace, toning, pauses, somebody that I'm training will be a better speaker within minutes of us working together. And that gets me every time.
Of course, yeah. And that's your calling. Like, I can tell that when you speak that it really is something that really deeply matters to you.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Speech matters a lot. It's the cornerstone of what I do.
Is that what you always thought you would do when you were little?
No, not at all. In fact, I'll talk about this tonight. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I'm talking tonight about dreams, and I'm talking specifically about the concept of a dream job. And plot spoiler alert, but I basically say I was told throughout my career I had a dream job. But the problem with that is when you get caught up in that, you can sometimes come to the end of your journey and you're left with nothing. Because if it wasn't something you dreamed of doing, and in fact if it was someone else's dream and you just got swept along in it, then you do find yourself questioning your purpose when that role comes to an end. And that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. So no, I never ever thought about it. To your point and your question, the only thing I was ever told was by my dad when I was growing up, make sure you speak well. If you speak well, if you communicate clearly, things will happen for you. And so he was right.
You did a fantastic job listening to your dad, because you became an amazing speaker. And before we end, let me ask you then, if somebody would ask you today, what is your dream job? What is your answer?
Well, I'm going to get to that in the talk. The nice thing about it is I say maybe it's not about chasing a dream job, but building a story. And I think building a story is what I'm really excited about right now, because my dream story or role or path, whatever you want to call it, is going to involve taking what I have been and applying it to something that benefits people, whether it's being people I coach, people in an audience, people watching TV. Any way I can do that is what I want to do.
Amazing. Any final tip, John, before we close off our wonderful interview?
No, you've been great. The final tip I would say is always empathy. Always be empathetic. Understand what your interviewer wants, what the audience wants. Make sure that you create, every time you do an interview, every time you do a talk, every time you speak to anyone, make it a only in this moment, organic happening. Make it special for everyone.
Wow, amazing. Thank you for making it special for us.
Sure.
Thank you for doing this amazing workshop. We cannot wait to listen to John Dykes this evening. And yeah, I'm sure I'm going to listen to your events and be there much more time than just this time.
Thanks
again.
very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you.